So, hello and welcome. Thanks again for joining us. We are really excited to be doing this webinar, Technical Assistance for Small Rural Communities Seeking Funding for Water Infrastructure Projects. And next slide. Thanks. So we have a lot to cover in the next hour. We have introductions and then a short poll. Then we'll hear about the EFC Technical Assistance Program that's available through RCAC and Willamette Partnership. We'll have a quick overview of other technical assistance and resources that are available, and then we should leave about 15 minutes for Q&A towards the end. Next up one. Thank you. So just a little housekeeping, all attendees are going to be muted while the presenters are speaking, and absolutely you're encouraged to use the chat during the presentation. And then during the Q&A portion, please raise your hand and then unmute yourself to talk or use the chat. Great, next. Okay, so I will kick off the introductions. My name is Claire McClellan. I work as a community planning partner at Willamette Partnership. I've been working in water infrastructure in rural places for about 4 years, and my favorite place to be outside in Oregon is anywhere on the coast. I love the ocean. All right, I will hand it over to Ethan.
Thanks, Claire. Hi, everyone. Ethan Brown, Community Water Partner here at One Partnership. I've been here about 5 years. My favorite place in rural Oregon is probably the McKenzie River.
Nice. And we were hoping to be joined. Oh, Dessa, hello. Yes. Let's see. Dessa is here. Are you able to come off mute or no?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I don't believe I have camera access given to me, but that's okay. My name is Dessa Wells. I'm with RCAC. I am the Oregon and Alaska Regional Field Manager. My favorite place to be outdoor in Oregon is I love the Bend area, Sun River area. Love to go hiking there. It's very beautiful.
Great. Thank you. So next, Emily. And we also want to give a thank you to the League of Oregon Cities for partnering with us and making this webinar happen. Great. So just really quickly, if you would like to take a moment to use the chat, please just introduce yourself with your name, your affiliation, and your position. Just to get an idea of who's here. We've got a great group today. Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Really cool to see the geographic distribution of folks who are here today. Okay, so while introductions are still filtering in, I think we can move on. Thanks, Emily. Great. So I'll just give a brief description of what this poll is going to look like, and then Emily, you can hit the first question. So we have 2 poll questions. The purpose of this is really just so we can learn more about how we can help. Willamette Partnership, RCAC, and our partners have developed a lot of different resources over the years. We want to see, is there a match with the challenges you might be facing with the resources we already have? If yes, then maybe after this webinar, we will be able to follow up and share some of those resources. You know, we're not going to get to everybody, but it should be a good place to start and kick off some good follow-up conversations. So answer these questions with that in mind. They should pop up on your screen. Please take about 1 minute to answer each question. All right, question 1. Awesome. I see some answers already filtering in. Thanks, everyone. Cool. All right, finish off that first question if you can in the next 20 seconds. It's okay if you don't get to it. Very cool. All right, Emily, let's move on to the next question. Great. This one is asking about any funding sources that you may have used. If you haven't used a funding source or this doesn't apply to you, no problem. Great. We'll take about 25 more seconds on this one. Okay, I think we can wrap this one up. No problem if you didn't get your answer all the way in. There's always time. We can talk about this later. So thank you, Emily. We can end those polls. Great. And now I'm actually going to hand it over to Dessa to talk through our CAC introductions.
Thank you, Claire. So happy to be here today. So wanted to give you a little bit of context of who Rural Communities Assistance Corporation, RCAC, is. We've been providing services to rural communities since 1978. Next slide. We are part of a national organization that serves the U.S. We have the privilege of serving the 13 Western states and Pacific Islands. We are a 501(c), a nonprofit organization. We serve Indigenous, rural communities through training, technical assistance, and financial assistance, as well as advocacy. Next slide. I'm here today representing our environmental departments. Our services are directed to small, low-income, rural, and Indigenous communities, wastewater and drinking water systems, and solid waste. The 5 core service areas we serve are capacity building, technical assistance, advocacy, training, and access to resources. Next slide. Thank you. I wanted to give an additional visual. This is our RCAC service area map. And as we zoom in, I would like you to see how RCAC is serving in Oregon. We're a mighty team of 4, and we're currently providing technical assistance on 33 projects. Some of those projects that you're going to see here in Oregon is also a team effort with Willamette Partnership. Through a competitive process, RCAC was selected as an EFC. So what is an EFC? It's the Environmental Finance Center Network. This is a collaboration between RCAC as the EFC and EPA to provide direct technical assistance to communities to facilitate access to infrastructure funding. And this is through the additional funding that was brought in by what is now called the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act. It was formerly referred to as BIL. These resources sunset December of 2027, and so our technical assistance efforts is to help communities access these fundings through the Drinking Water and Clean Water State Revolving Fund programs. Next slide. Thank you. So what does this technical assistance look like? Well, it's to improve financial readiness and access funding through us providing that on-the-ground assistance to assess funding health, the financial health, preparing for funding, assisting with funding applications, and supporting sustainable infrastructure projects. Next slide. RCAC is also funded through other federal grants that supports our technical assistance. And so some of these federal grants you see here is through USDA. There's also an EPA drinking water and wastewater program and Human Health Services, HHS. Next slide. For technical assistance eligibility, we look at a few pieces of criteria. We do assist drinking water and wastewater systems. The target population is 3,300, but we're able to assist systems or communities that have a population of 10,000 or less. The community's median household income needs to be at the Oregon State MHI level or below. And we do help communities that are defined as disadvantaged by the Clean Water or Drinking Water State Revolving Fund program. They do have a clear definition of what that is. And so we use that definition to be able to provide technical assistance. Next slide. So as I shared, our CAC and Willamette Partnership is a team. We work collaboratively, providing complementary technical assistance. Our CAC provides funding to support Willamette's partnership's efforts in the EFC. We provide that complementary TA as I shared, but it may look differently because we each bring unique skill sets into the program. So RCAC's and Willamette Partnership's goal is to walk alongside utilities communities as they navigate infrastructure improvements by accessing SRF funding. Next slide. RCAC has a vast TA menu that includes the following that you're going to see on the next two slides, plus more. But some of the ways that we help through the EFC to improve financial capacity and becoming funding ready is through technical assistance such as asset management planning, being able to make sure that you have articles and corporations filed with the Secretary of State, having the proper bylaws and ordinances and policies in place. Next slide. We also can help through budgeting strategies, conducting rate studies to make sure that systems are at the minimum rate threshold to be a viable lender or borrower. Being able to navigate SAM.gov and obtaining the UEI as needed, or through an income survey to prove eligibility. Maybe it's becoming defined as a disadvantaged community or becoming eligible for CDBG through a low moderate income survey. I wanted to share with you a case study, and this is actually a really wonderful opportunity because both RCAC and Willamette Partnership is providing direct technical assistance to the city of Tillamook. RCAC has been working on the drinking water side, while Willamette Partnership is helping build capacity on the wastewater side. And I feel like it's just a really great demonstration of how we've collaborated and provided that complementary technical assistance to support a community. RCAC conducted a drinking water rate study for Tillamook. And because of these efforts, it helped prove that funding readiness when they applied for drinking water SRF funding. This was taken into consideration when they were reviewing the application, and Tillamook was approved for a $7.2 million upgrade to their drinking water system. This funding is going to cover approximately 17,000 linear feet of 24-inch pipe, a new connection vault at the north end of the community, and relocation and replacement of approximately 3 water service connections. So this is a pretty large project. And through those efforts, we were able to help them improve their financial capacity to be able to become a viable borrower. Thank you all so much for allowing me to be here and present. Thank you, Claire, for the partnership in this. Really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dessa. All right. So now I will take the reins a little bit and I'll introduce Willamette Partnership and talk about how the EFC program looks at Willamette Partnership and get into that complementary technical assistance that Dessa mentioned. So Willamette Partnership, or we often call ourselves WP, we're a nonprofit based in Oregon. Our name does have Willamette in it, but we actually have worked extensively across the Pacific Northwest for almost 2 decades. And we focus our work at the intersection of community, economy, and environment. Our mission is really to help people and nature thrive together. That's very broad, but one of the ways that we do that is through this Environmental Finance Center work. Next slide. Thanks. So as Dessa mentioned, WP is a TA provider that is working through RCAC's EFC program, as well as in partnership with the TA that RCAC provides. And that means that we use the same criteria to determine who is eligible for that free technical assistance that Dessa already ran through. And RTA has the same overall goals that Dessa mentioned, which are to get communities to be funding ready and help address those critical water infrastructure challenges in rural spaces. We know that communities are juggling a lot, so we aim to tailor our assistance to each place we work, and we try to balance immediate needs, like things that needed to be fixed yesterday, with helping address systemic challenges that might be impacting the long-term resiliency of your infrastructure or in your community. We also prioritize infrastructure solutions that can meet more than one need. So for example, we are working actually on a stormwater infrastructure project that includes bioswales, and we're doing this in conjunction with one of the communities who's part of our EFC program right now. They are using bioswales not only to improve flood management, but also to reduce long-term maintenance costs and provide shade. Okay, next slide. Okay, so yes, here's a map. I wanted to give you an idea of who we've worked with so far. Over the past 3 years through our EFC program, we have gotten to work with 11 communities around the state. Projects have ranged from a community well water testing program. We've helped communities submit applications to the drinking water SRF. We've also helped with assessing septic options for communities that are rebuilding after wildfire. These are just a couple examples of the projects we are already working on, and Ethan, my colleague, will go into more detail with some case studies later on. Next slide. Thanks. So now we'll talk a little bit about what is a good fit, what kind of projects or challenges are a good fit for our EFC work. We usually work on projects that are complex and tricky. So if you just need funding to replace one single culvert, for example, our program actually isn't the best fit. We have a lot of expertise in working on issues that are complicated, or that have hornet's nests of tricky social or political dynamics, or on long-term issues that are holding the community back in some way. Maybe backlog of maintenance or a challenge with those like bylaws, policy issues that Dessa mentioned earlier. And of course, we also need to make sure that your community meets the EFC requirements, that less than 10K, meeting rural and or distressed criterias. We will also need to make sure that you have the goal, at least eventually, you might not be ready now, but to access water infrastructure funding like those drinking water or clean water SRFs. And we also want to know, do you have the capacity and political will to work with us? And we look for these things to make sure that our projects will be set up for success. Next, thanks. So now I'll talk through a couple of the different types of technical assistance that we provide in our EFC work. We've put them into these different buckets, and we like to call this our EFC TA menu. First, one thing we can offer is decision-making support. So maybe you have a laundry list of priorities or challenges, projects you really want to get done. Maybe you have a water master plan, something like that, where you really have a lot of things you want to work on. We can help you think through those different projects and challenges and prioritize things, figure out the best order to work on them and sequence them, understand what is connected to what other thing, and just to help with that kind of decision-making support. The second thing we can do is policy research and planning support. We can research things like, is a solution that you want to use, is it permissible? Is it aligned with federal and statewide policies? And we can help you figure out the planning steps that you might need to take to get there. We, as Dessa mentioned, have different expertises in this regard, and one of the strengths of the EFC program is that if Willamette Partnership, who is assisting you, doesn't have that strength, we have a great network of other TA providers, and we can connect you to other resources who might help you with something that we're not experts in. And third, we can help research funding options. That's that funding road mapping piece. We can look at all the different funding options that are out there, narrow them down to what's relevant to the projects you want to work on with us, and then match those funding options to your projects, get them aligned to the timelines that you are working on and to the financial capacity and needs that your community or utility is operating under. We also help write grant and loan applications all the time. We especially focus on clean water and safe drinking water revolving loan fund applications, but we also write other applications for state agency or federal funding programs. Fourth, we can support organizational capacity by assisting with systems setup, like project management systems or tracking tools. Maybe you need a spreadsheet to track your projects. Maybe you need help setting up a project management software so all your staff use the same thing and can access that. We can help with things like that. We can also help if you are going through a governance transition or if you need to set yourself up to go through a governance transition, like shifting from one type of entity to another that has different authorities. So we can help with the planning and coordination steps that are part of that process. And finally, we can help with communications like designing brochures, presentations, or reports, and helping with outreach to your community so other people are on board and engaged in the process. We know that's really important everywhere and especially in places that are small. Lastly, I want to note that usually our projects include most, if not all, of these different menu options. Next. Okay, and I just wanted to give an overview of what our TA process would look like, what you could expect if you were going to start working with us. So we would have some initial meetings, understand what your community or system needs, how that fits into our expertise and how we can work together. And after those initial meetings, we would, Willamette Partnership would draft the scope and deliverables for our work together. One of our Willamette Partnership staff would be a dedicated point of contact for you. We will email and meet with you as needed, but we really don't want to overload you. That's something that we could work out together depending on your preferences. Your roles would be to work with us for onboarding for a couple of hours and then share information, documents, and data, etc. with us just to help us do the work we're going to do with you. Then meet with us as needed and review any deliverables or drafts as we complete them. Okay, next up. Great, so now I'm going to hand it off to Ethan to talk through a couple case studies.
Thanks, Claire. So let's ground that list of technical assistance tasks that Claire provided with some actual case studies that show how we flexibly tailor our work to meet the community's needs. Next slide. So the first example I'd like to talk about is the unincorporated community of Mapleton in Lane County. So as a caveat at the start, we did not help them alone. So our CAC provided an enormous amount of support to the Mapleton Water District, Regional Solutions, Lane County, the COG, everyone helped out throughout this process. So as background, Mapleton is a small rural community without much opportunity right now for economic growth, but their residents are reliant on community drinking water service, and their entire business district is served by centralized wastewater service provided by this entity called the Mapleton Commercial Area Owners Association, or MCAOA. So we first were connected to the wastewater side of things through a board member who petitioned any and all TA providers that they could find to ask for help because their treatment equipment and their facility was in dire need of replacement. So they barely had any cash on hand. They only collected revenue once a year, and that only really covered basic operations and some band-aid maintenance. And there's a lot more stuff that made this project really complex, including the fact that they lost all their records due to a fire like a decade before, a lot of rapid board turnover. It was just a complicated project from our point of view. But from their point of view, they kind of ran into a lot of hurdles that they needed help with. So they spoke with DEQ, they spoke with the county, EPA, with RCAC, and a lot of different folks. And they kept on running into the same issue, which is that they needed money right away to fix their broken infrastructure. But the type of organization MCAOA was restricted them from being able to accept it. So they were incorporated in the late 80s when the system was first built as a public charity, a 509(a)(2), which you probably aren't familiar with. I wasn't familiar with it beforehand, but that's basically an organization like a zoo or a museum that gets most of their revenue through membership dues and fees. So not typical for a wastewater service provider. And because of that, they were not eligible for Clean Water SRF or federal funding. And that designation actually capped how much they could receive per year through grants because the majority of their funding had to be coming through that public revenue through their membership fees. So we're talking tens of thousands of dollars maximum that they could receive through grants through foundation or like private sources, not even through federal. So this was an economically distressed area. Their ratepayers couldn't make up that difference. And so they were stuck without access to the funding they needed to save their system. Next slide. So our approach to technical assistance was to try and figure out a way around this. Other folks have been looking as to like, is there a way that that we could get a federal funding into this organization in some way? But they kept on running into the same issue, which was that it just wasn't eligible. So we approached it through the concept of what if they created something new? What if they became something that could accept that federal funding? So the group was pretty skeptical of it. It sounded complicated, wholesale governance change. But they were kind of at their wits' end and they said, have at it, see if this could work. So we considered all the potential options, such as standing up a new sanitary district, merging with the Mapleton Drinking Water District, restructuring as a 501(c)(3), or helping the county set up a utility district, forming as an authority, all these different things. And that research actually became a separate deliverable called our Pathways for Resilient Wastewater Management, which we'll drop in the chat box here, that evaluates all of the different governance changes that a wastewater provider could undertake to obtain the resources or capacity and the capacity it needs. So we came back to the wastewater group and said, these are your options, but we have one very strong recommendation, and that's to merge with the Mapleton Water District. There were a lot of advantages to this. It could be done in a matter of a couple months versus a couple of years for the next best option, which was to stand up a new sanitary district. The cost was very low in terms of actually like doing all the due diligence to make this happen. It retained local control. It would still be locals who would be on the board. And the fact that the Mapleton Water District and the wastewater entity, they actually shared several board members. So there was this continuity of leadership across that. So both entities were interested. They thought this sounded like a good idea, but they were skeptical whether their ratepayers and those who paid membership dues were going to be interested in this, that this would be something big and something new, and that's always going to be a potential concern. So we drafted a communication strategy and outreach materials, like 2-pagers, and we gave these to the board to successfully navigate some really hard meetings with residents and ratepayers, and they reached consensus that both entities wanted to form a merger. But then we realized that there was a policy barrier in the OAR's, Oregon Administrative Rules. It actually would not allow a special district to merge with a non-special district wastewater provider. That 509(a)(2) designation was still being a problem. So we talked it over with Lane County, and they connected with a state legislative champion who spearheaded a bill that got signed by the governor last summer that removed that barrier for them to be able to merge and for other entities to merge in unincorporated areas. So now that there were no barriers to this merger, they actually needed to do it. And that is pretty complicated. And so what we did was we drafted a very long punch list and categorized it. These are the due diligence that this group needs to do, this is what that group needs to do, so that everyone was on the same page and everything was laid out on the table, including all real property titles and easements. The financial reporting with IRS and Oregon was squared away. The actual process for dissolution was outlined. We even drafted resolutions for both boards to actually initiate the transition. And they merged, but they still needed that money for infrastructure. And they still needed to know what was the infrastructure that needed to get fixed. So first, we helped them obtain a $50,000 TA grant from Business Oregon to develop that facilities plan, to figure out what needs to be replaced, how much is it going to cost. And that helped us then apply for Economic Development Administration funding in March in 2026 for about $1 million in construction funding to actually implement that plan. So it's still outgoing. We don't know whether the Mapleton Water District is going to get this or not, but we're pretty hopeful. This TA engagement it's not typical, but in some ways it is typical. It lasted a lot longer and there's a lot more hand holding than we normally do for something like this. But it was such a unique and rare opportunity to fix this systemic issue for this community that we felt we had to invest in it. So their wastewater service, it was formed incorrectly at the start. 40 years, it kind of held them back, ended up polluting the river several times, imperiled the public health. And it kind of posed an existential risk to the community because if the wastewater service failed, then the entire business district would have to shutter for a while. But we think that they're now on their way. Next slide. So switching gears, we'd like to talk about the city of Mosier, which is in a very different situation. And while they're also very small, like Mapleton, they are growing very quickly, and they have a lot of influx of grants and economic development opportunities, people actually moving to the area, they're building houses, and they have really amazing local staff and local champions who are forward-looking, and they want to avoid headaches in the future. So they have their drinking water and wastewater infrastructure. It's being planned out. It's got funding in hand. That's not an issue for them whatsoever. What is an issue is their stormwater management. It's pretty underdeveloped in terms of infrastructure. They have minimal curb and gutter in only a few different areas. And the actual stormwater regulations are pretty anemic in terms of the city code being implemented. So when we connected to the city, they were already in the midst of this stormwater master planning process. And they had just approved a TMDL implementation plan that requires the creation of a low impact development ordinance that is described in that stormwater master plan. And so we thought, why don't we go ahead and focus on these stormwater gaps that they are facing? Next slide. So, for instance, with stormwater, they're planning a big new community center, and they needed funding support in order to implement these natural stormwater solutions that the stormwater master plan describes and prescribes property developers and property owners to do. And so we're helping them with grant writing for that, to manage stormwater from all the site's hard surfaces. They wanted help with communicating this new TMDL implementation plan to their residents and to this city council. And so we're developing an engagement strategy to be used by the city at city council meetings with local watershed gatherings to convey that information and share with folks what exactly the city's doing and why. And for my work on this project, I'm actually translating those new regulations in that stormwater master plan, that LID, low impact development ordinance, turning it into an actual ordinance within the city code. So that includes finding the appropriate homes for the stormwater language, finding potential loopholes or areas where it kind of be confusing if you were reviewing it as to like which policy is actually being implemented when, and helping clarify those. And because the city did not want to do sort of like wholesale rewrite of large sections of code, we're sort of tweaking existing sections. That makes it kind of hard for property owners to understand where to look for this new guidance. So we're creating this explainer document, probably be 2 to 4 pages long, that's going to describe when is the LID ordinance triggered, what infiltration needs to be done on site, and which lid practices are prescribed for a specific site based off of conditions, infiltration rates, or land use. So this project's actually ongoing. I've drafted the lid ordinance. I'm working on the explainer document right now, but it's a really exciting project for us, and the community finds a lot of value in the work that we're doing right now. Next slide. And so far, we've mentioned a lot of technical assistance projects that we've undertaken through our EFC funding source. But there are other ways to receive technical assistance from Willamette Partnership. Next slide. So first off, we do some fee-for-service consulting work. It's usually with better resourced or larger communities. And sometimes it's actually done in hand with the state of Oregon, because we have a master services agreement with the state to help do some specific work like this. We do work with some of the Oregon foundations to provide us with some internal capacity to help those distressed communities that are in that capacity donut gap, where they're too big for EFC, they're larger than 10,000 people, but they're still economically distressed. But they're also not big enough to be able to solve a lot of these challenges themselves or to fundraise for it themselves. So kind of like that 10 to 30, 40,000 person donut gap. And lastly, because we're a nonprofit, we can be written into grants as subawardees. This is really common for us because often we're providing consultant services and nonprofit rates. And lastly, I want to talk about this sort of collaborative technical assistance element to our work, which is kind of the bread and butter of what Land Partnership's been doing for 20 years. We focus and have significant expertise on setting, convening, and facilitating large collaborative tables with a lot of different folks at it to address shared water challenges, particularly around agriculture. So we sometimes work through NRCS or OEB funding. Sometimes it's through those fee-for-service consulting agreements or through the work through the state. But we do this a lot across Oregon and in Washington. Next slide. And beyond direct technical assistance, there's actually a lot that can be done just by connecting to the right people and learning from them. So we recommend attending the upcoming League of Oregon Cities conference, so that Claire and a few of our other colleagues will be joining. That's a good start. I have 6-month-old twins, and so I am not allowed to leave the house for an entire night. So I'm not going to be able to join. I'm sorry about that. RCAC also has a webinar series that's ongoing right now. It's all free. And the current one, I think, is their 4th, and it's in the series, and it's on unlocking funding through policies, financial capacity, rate setting, and communication strategies. So at this point, I'd like to hand it over to Laura Johnson to talk about Drinking Water Source Protection Program.
Hi, everyone. Yes, I am hopping on today to give a brief plug for the Drinking Water Source Protection Program. This is a joint program managed by both the Oregon Health Authority and Department of Environmental Quality. And the headline here for us is that if you're thinking about your drinking water infrastructure, your intakes or wells, your treatment facilities, those components of your built system are part of a larger system that includes where you're sourcing your water from, whether that be a watershed through a stream or a river, a freshwater spring coming out of the ground, or an underground aquifer that you're pulling through your well. And in case you didn't know, there is a program that offers free technical assistance to help water suppliers to keep the water that you're bringing into your treatment plant clean and safe. And there are some key benefits to thinking about the whole systems approach of your water system and thinking about the source of your water and how protected it is. Including this element of source water protection can help you unlock funding for local projects. You can access maps and data and the expertise of our program staff and our partners to help with your projects. We are an advocate for understanding what risks to your water source exist and taking low-cost proactive measure to prevent contamination, because if your water becomes contaminated, water systems bear the cost, communities bear the cost, treatment is more expensive, and involves potential risk of public trust. So everybody can know where your water is coming from and be proactive through free technical assistance that our program offers to weave protection into planning decisions, and to develop partnerships that can help, because we recognize that a lot of water systems are smaller, low capacity, don't have independent funding sources to do this type of work. So our program is really set up to meet folks where they're at. If you're interested in pursuing this, you don't have to, it's entirely voluntary, but if you are interested, you can email our program at drinkingwater.protection@deq.oregon.gov, and someone will follow up with you to learn more about what your project is, what your source of water is, and what ways that we might be able to assist you. Hopefully we can talk more in the future. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Laura. All right, we have reached the end of our presentation portion. We're right on time. That is pretty incredible. And that means we have 15 minutes to spend for questions and engagement. I see folks have already been using the chat, which is wonderful, to ask questions. Please continue to do so. And here is our contact information for all of the folks who have spoken today. I will also point out the QR code on the RCAC blurb with Dessa's name. That, if you scan it with a smartphone, that will take you actually to a form where you can request technical assistance from RCAC. But you can always email any of us after this webinar. We really encourage you to do so.